Welcome back to Football Weather. Galen, Clavio, Matt Blaszka joining you as we wrap up another week of college football and get set for the upcoming week as we get fully into conference play in many cases. We had some conference games this week, which we'll talk about. We had some big games, some big out-of-conference games, couple big in-conference games. We're already shuffling up the puzzle at this point, and some interesting stuff coming out the other side. Matt, good to see you. How are you feeling today?
It's been a lot of football with Florida, Indiana playing on Friday and going to the game. If that feels like many moons ago, and it was not even 24 hours ago, or I guess 48 hours ago, barely.
And this is the rarity, because it wasn't just Indiana playing, and we tailgated, but your institution, FCS, I don't know if I'd call them a stalwart, but yes. FCS institution, Indiana State, traveling here to take on Indiana. They regretted the decision, I think, after the way that the game went, 73-0 in favor of Indiana. But it was a great night for football.
It was beautiful. Got to take the kids. It was both of my kids' first real game, and they did fantastic. We made it to the third quarter, but it was beautiful. They were able to run around a little bit. Great night. They asked when the fireworks would continue, and I was like, well, you're probably not going to get many games like that where you're going to see that many fireworks, but they certainly enjoyed that piece of it.
Not as bad as, what was it, Mississippi State, Alcorn State, where they ran out of fireworks, I think it was, and had to shorten the game. Yeah, the fireworks were fun, and you get that many scores, you get used to it after a while. That's how you bring the kids in. You got to have things that explode. So, yeah. But we're going to talk about all the stuff that happened this week in college football, and we've already had some firings, which – this is early. It's not even halfway through September, technically, on the day that we're recording this. But this has become an industry where if things are going in the wrong direction, you got to make some changes, because the offseason starts earlier and earlier. So we'll talk about that, and we'll also preview what's coming up in week 4. But first of all, just a quick reminder, folks, we are brought to you here on the Back Home Network by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. Home Field Apparel, of course, not just the normal T-shirts that you'll see, but some offbeat ones, like this one I'm wearing right now. It's great to be a Miami Hurricane shirt, which is a favorite running shirt of mine. I taught at the U, as many of you know. What do you got on here?
I got the Washington State. And I didn't realize it before I put it on today. I was like, North Texas 15-9-19, but still supporting the Cougs, in their Pac-12, 8, 6, whatever their conquest is going to be. Yeah, but a tough one for the Cougs this past week.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where there's not necessarily that much of a shame in losing to North Texas. North Texas is 40th in, I think not an FPI, they're 40th in efficiency rating. I'd have to look for where they are. Where are they in FPI? They are 67th. They jumped up 21 spots with that destruction of Washington State. But still, rough look for Washington State, as it was a rough look for Oregon State as well. Not a great time for the leftovers out of the Pac-12. But if you're a fan of those teams, or a fan of Miami, or a fan of any of the other hundreds of teams at FBS and FCS, you can buy shirts, crew necks, hoodies, whatever, at Home Field Apparel. Go to homefieldapparel.com, check out the store, use the code HOME23, get 15% off your first order. Tell them we sent you here from Football Weather. Matt, let's go ahead and let the people know what we're going to be talking about today. We had some topics. We're going to start off. We got some jobs open already. We've got some guys maybe teetering or not teetering, as the case may be, based upon what their buyouts are. We've got our reveal of the week 3 or the post-week 3 merit poll, which we'll explain again as we get closer to that. And then we'll preview what happened with week 4. We'll also take a look back at some of the key games in week 3. We'll do that first before we get to the jobs themselves. So as we scan through, we got to start really, I think, with the game that finished off the night in South Bend. Texas A&M 41, Notre Dame 40. This was a game you and I think, disagreed on. Did you have Texas A&M winning this game before the year started?
I think I did. Yeah.
So good call by you. I didn't think that there was a way that we were going to see Texas A&M be able to go in and win this one, but they absolutely did. And it was a fascinating game in a bunch of ways because it felt on the one hand like Notre Dame was the superior team for large stretches of the game, and yet they really struggled with the athleticism that Texas A&M put out there. They really struggled with defensively trying to match up against A&M. They let up a 21-point second quarter, and even with all of that, with Marcel Reed passing for 360 yards, rushing for 37 yards, Le'Veon Moss scoring 3 touchdowns. I never felt like Notre Dame was actually going to lose the game until they have the mishap at the end, and then Texas A&M has to pull it out on a 4th down play, a pass to a blocking tight end. It was a really well-designed play. Mike Elko comes away with the big victory. I mean, Notre Dame played well in this game, but this is another game where it looked like they had an opponent on the ropes and they couldn't close the deal in the 4th quarter. It's just a marked difference from what we saw last year with Notre Dame when they won most of these.
Yeah, it was an impressive, like as you mentioned, both quarterbacks, CJ Carr and Marcel Reed. It was a great performance by both. Certainly, this game's going to, when we look back at it, probably later in the season, we're like, this is probably one of the better games of the year. It did feel like these are 2 top 10 teams. So don't throw anything at me. They're not. I'm not saying Notre Dame's a top 10 team. It certainly felt like these teams were really upper echelon teams all night. I was with you. I didn't think Notre Dame would ever actually lose. Then when they missed that extra point, you're just like, is that going to cost them this game? And that's, obviously it could go to overtime. You don't know what happens there. But certainly the 4th down and 10 play call, Marcel Reed, that entire drive, it felt like he was on the ropes and he kept making the big play. But A&M now 3-0, a really big win. You assume as we've talked about in previous episode, Notre Dame's schedule certainly lightens up. So they're going to get that Notre Dame bump. They're certainly going to move up the rankings, and as they're still ranked now. So this win should help them if they are on the fringe, of the SEC bid or whatever it looks like. They should be in the mix. But a really good win for Elko. He needed this after, last year they finished after losing to Texas. I think this puts them in a really good spot. In that big there's a big pack, and maybe we'll talk about this later, between them, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, just all sitting there in that same spot. Auburn, Oklahoma, maybe, that is in prime position for a playoff. So this really gives them an extra feather that maybe those other teams don't have yet.
Yeah, I mean, you were a little more excited about their prospects at the beginning of the year than I was. I had them going 8-4. I think you had them at 10-2.
I did. I had 10-2.
But I mean, now that they've gotten over this hump, and now that Florida doesn't look that good, and now that Texas's offense looks not great, I could see a route to 11-1 with this team. I mean, there's some interesting hurdles. Auburn at home is going to be a really fascinating next game for Texas A&M. But if they can get past that, they get Mississippi State and Florida at home. They have 3 home games in a row. Traveling to Arkansas doesn't seem that daunting. They still, I mean, they got to travel to Missouri, but LSU. Who knows with them? That could be a real pivotal game for both of those teams. And then they got South Carolina at home. And who knows what's going on with them at this point, but they end up losing well. So I do think it really sets them up nicely, and this will be a feather in their cap that a lot of other SEC teams may not have. So a huge win for Mike Elko. And, for that project, I think to really get going, they had to win a game like this. And for Notre Dame, I mean, we talked about this before. We talked about it last week. If they didn't win this game, the problem for Notre Dame is like the rest of their schedule does not really have a lot of quality wins. They got, at Arkansas is going to be like a fringe top 25, top 30 team.
Right.
USC, they get at home. They're also going to be probably fringe top 25. And that's really it, Matt. There's really nothing else on their schedule except maybe at Pitt, but I'm not exactly. Pitt just lost to West Virginia.
Yeah, that Pitt loss, I was wondering that watching that game but that Pitt loss, how that could really hurt them schedule-wise. But for Notre Dame, they almost had to win that game and then maybe lose to say Arkansas or something like that, just so they would have that feather game. Because right now it really comes down to USC being ranked, maybe, and you're right, Pitt maybe being better, but again, they lost to West Virginia. It's going to be interesting to see how the committee is going to handle this Notre Dame team. And again, don't throw anything at me, fans. I'm just putting this out there, right? The Notre Dame, the brand, it's those things have not mattered really yet. But they lost a 4-point game on the road in the final 2 minutes to Miami. They lost on the final play, essentially, of this Texas A&M game. How is that going to be viewed in 9 or 10 weeks if they start rattling off all these wins? That should keep them in the mix, in theory, as other teams start to fall and the SEC starts beating themselves up, the Big Ten starts beating themselves up a little bit. This may push them forward, but they have to start beating some of these teams handily. Like they have Purdue next, and then they have Arkansas. But that game against USC is really going to be probably the last feather game they're going to have, and they're going to have to win, maybe win convincingly to shake off these first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and you just wait, like Notre Dame fans will start to bring up, what about Indiana? What about last year? They didn't beat a lot of tough teams. The difference was Indiana smashed their opponents all season.
Right.
And, if you look last year at strength of record, which everybody forgets about, but is a metric that ESPN prominently utilizes.
Yeah.
Strength of record is essentially a measure of how impressive was your performance against your schedule, not just wins, but also the quality of the victories. Indiana was 8th last year in strength of record. Notre Dame's 126th this year in strength of record. That's not going to get it done. And so, look, I think it's entirely possible that they could wind up and blow out a ton of the teams that are on their schedule, but they just can't. They have no slip-ups left.
Nothing left.
And, I mean, the lesser teams, starting with Purdue this next week, and then moving forward to, games against Navy and games against Syracuse and they're Boise State, NC State, they're going to have to win by like 30, 35 points in most of these games to get that number back up. So it's just something to keep in mind.
And just real quick, one thing that kept Notre Dame in the mix last year, despite losing to Northern Illinois, is their defense was amazing all year. Yeah. They gave them 41 last night. They have 28 to Miami. And Miami probably should have scored more in that game. They took their foot off the gas. You and I watched that game together. We're like, what are we doing here, Miami? You should probably be scoring more here. And they didn't. So for Notre Dame to really move forward, they have to start playing better defense because this is not going to be sustainable. And they could lose another game just like this if they don't start playing defense.
I hate to say it, but this is why you don't hire former Rutgers head coaches as your defensive coordinator, right? It's not great. But no, it's a great point. Like, if you go deeper into FPI, which is ESPN's metric, and you look at just efficiencies, right now Notre Dame's 36th in the country in overall efficiency. They're 47th in defensive efficiency. But just not going to get it done. And it's not to say that they can't get it done, but many of the complaints I was seeing from Notre Dame fans online last night were like, where did the defense that we had last year go? And I think it's a reasonable question to ask. It left with Al Golden, I think, perhaps.
I think you're right. Yeah, Al Golden's a fantastic defensive mind, and you can see it does not translate to Chris Ash at this point.
Yeah. Let's move on to the second of the 3 games we wanted to spotlight from this past weekend. Georgia 44, Tennessee 41 in overtime. This game went from, wow, Tennessee's going to blow them out. This is their time, to, wow, Georgia is just going to kill their hopes, to, wow, Tennessee's come all the way back. And they had the shot at the end there. They end up false starting, which moves a field goal attempt back. They missed that field goal. They kick a field goal, in the overtime, and then Georgia scores a touchdown. And Tennessee's streak of misery against the Bulldogs continues. Georgia reestablishes themselves in a game they did not play particularly well in.
No,
I mean, you'll see as we go on later. I certainly give Georgia a ton of credit for this win. It's probably the best win in college football at this point when you consider location as well as quality of opponent. But I think it opens up certainly a ton of questions for Georgia in terms of, like, Tennessee's good offensively. I don't think people think they're that good offensively. And yet on the flip side, this was one of the big stumbling blocks potentially for Georgia on the schedule. And now that they've gotten by that, they can kind of breathe a sigh of relief as, the rest of the games on their schedule, while challenging, I don't think there's another game on their schedule in the regular season that is as challenging as this particular game was.
This was the big game for Tennessee. This has been their bugaboo. They knocked that one down a couple of years ago with Bama. This looked like it was going to be the second one. The way they came out, I was like, man, they are here to put a number. And as we always talk about, putting a skin on this game. And Georgia came back. They reshuffled. Gunnar Stockton looked great, but so did Joey Aguilar. I mean, I don't want to take away from either offense. They both were going up and down the field. It's unfortunate that Tennessee had that opportunity to win the game. They probably should have won the game in regulation, but again, you have to finish the Dogs. The Dogs have been known to do this the last 5 years since that first national championship. They are very difficult to beat. When you have the opportunity to put them away, you just have to do it. And Tennessee just couldn't do it all day. Yeah. This doesn't mean I don't like Tennessee. I actually like Tennessee more than I did last week. I was not concerned. I was just curious how Joey Aguilar taking that next step, coming from UCLA. That's a totally different conversation we'll have later. How he would react in a big game, and he looked great. Obviously, threw a couple picks, but to throw for 371 against the Dogs, for almost 500 yards against the Dogs, that's something to look for Tennessee. A 3-point loss to the Dogs shouldn't hurt you, but now they have to go out and really prove this against other teams in the SEC because their schedule does not get that much easier.
Yeah, the thing with Tennessee, I mean, they get a little bit of a break this next week. They get to play the Trent Dilfer coached UAB Blazers.
Watch out.
Yeah. But I think while this loss hurts, they've really only got one game on the schedule that I would be really concerned about, which is the game at Alabama. And I think that they probably could sustain losses in both of those games and still be in the hunt for the playoff. They'd have to win the rest of their games. They'd probably have to put a little bit of a hurting on, like you look at the rest of their schedule. They got Oklahoma at home. They've got Arkansas at home. They're at Mississippi State, at Florida, at Kentucky, and then they've got Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, that suddenly doesn't look like as winnable a game as it was when things started. Yeah. But you look at that mix, and it's like there's a path there where you can still sustain even after this loss and get yourself into the playoff. And again, I'm with you. I thought Tennessee, they looked very good. They looked like they had figured out some things. They are likely going to have to figure out something defensively because, like you were just talking about, Notre Dame's defense being problematic. Tennessee, efficiency-wise, is 46th defensively right now.
Yeah.
And that's not really going to work. Georgia, for their on their side, they're not as good offensively as I thought they'd be, but they're just about as good offensively as they are defensively in terms of efficiency. So I feel like they'll be in relatively decent shape. And you look at the Bulldogs and what they've got in front of them right now. They've got Alabama in their next game. They got to go to Auburn. They've got Ole Miss still on the schedule. They've got Texas, and they've got Georgia Tech. So a lot of tough games left for this Georgia team. I do wonder if you saw some warning signs in this game that should give you concern if you're a Georgia fan or if you're watching them and thinking that they're the top team in the country. But even if you do, I don't think that takes away from the win that they had in this one.
Yeah, and I mean why this is bigger for Georgia too is they don't leave the hedges outside going to Auburn October 11th or November 8th against Mississippi State. Last year's schedule was the exact opposite. They had to flip it this year, right? So this year they have they fit Alabama at home, Kentucky at home, Ole Miss at home. Obviously, Florida's the cocktail party, but then they have Texas at home, and then Georgia Tech's in Atlanta. So I mean, they're not leaving the friendly confines of Athens where they just don't lose.
Right.
And so if you're being fair to this team, and I picked Georgia to lose to Texas, I am not thinking that now. Maybe we'll talk here about Texas in a second. Georgia, and I don't expect many teams to run the table anymore, but I don't see a path now where Georgia does not get to at least 11 wins. Yes, they do have Auburn, but their other road game is Mississippi State. Now, Tech is very good, but Georgia's still better. And now that they've gotten past this first hurdle, you would like to see that this team is going to continue to get better, and they're going to have that opportunity. I mean, they can really put Alabama in a really tough spot here in 2 weeks, and I'm sure Kirby, his one nemesis, his one struggle has been Bama, right? He's like 1-6 and won the national championship. So he can put if he gets that game, then Bama's got those 2 losses now, and now we're really talking about a tough road for Bama, as you mentioned, because Bama's got to play Tennessee then 2 weeks later, and so then Bama really is in on the ropes for a playoff spot at that point. And talking about buyouts here in a bit, this is where the SEC gets really interesting because we're going to have a lot of these teams. There's a big middle, and we have a big middle game next week that a lot of that you and I probably didn't consider a big middle game, but maybe it could be. We'll talk about it a little bit, but Oklahoma, Auburn.
Yeah, this is where, to some degree, it would have been, I think, endlessly fascinating if Tennessee had won that game. Because I agree. I think Georgia, I picked Georgia before the season to go 12-0, and I still think that they'll go 12-0. But it would have been fascinating if they'd gone 11-1 and 7-1 in conference, and Tennessee had done the same. And now you've got this huge mishmash of teams that are kind of in the middle. Because when I look at Alabama now, as you said, like, can they go into Georgia and win? If they can, well, now we get the chaos that we're hoping for. If they can't, you could see Alabama maybe picking up another couple of losses, maybe 3. That's going to be a really interesting thing to follow along. And there's other teams now, even the teams that are playing well in the SEC, I've got some question marks about. LSU has not looked particularly good. Yes, they beat Florida last night, but you'll see when we get to the merit poll, I'm souring on them quickly. Ole Miss is 3-0. I have not been terribly impressed with what Ole Miss has done so far on the season. I didn't think they were that impressive in that game against Arkansas, a team they should be demonstrably better than. So it reopens, I think, the window or the door, however, for however you want to say it, for Oklahoma, for Missouri, for Auburn, for Texas A&M, for Vanderbilt at this point, who's 3-0, and suddenly you look at their available games and it's like, well, like, they got to go to Alabama, but they beat Alabama last year.
Right.
They got to go to Texas, and Texas doesn't look like they can move the football. They got to go to Tennessee, but that's a rivalry game and anything can happen. It really is. It's fascinating in a way that the SEC hasn't quite been to the same degree in the past, because it feels like there's always a clear leader or two clear leaders in the SEC. There may not actually be this year. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And the only reason I think we're putting Georgia in a different stratosphere right now, maybe not a different stratosphere, because the schedule lines up better for them than anyone else, that but they're the clear one, just because it's just how things are breaking, where everyone else is going to be mashing together. It just seems like that way it's breaking based on road games and home games. And we'll talk more about this too as we go along. But there certainly seems to be at least 9 deep right now, where if you said these 9 teams have a chance, I would say, yeah, they're probably all in the mix right now. And they're all playing each other this year, which is really going to be great for the sport.
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating. Let's switch gears real quick as we wrap up talking. We got 2 games to talk about. Let's stick in the SEC for one of them. Vanderbilt 31, South Carolina 7. This one was not close. And I mean, South Carolina lost their quarterback. That's going to be the dominant narrative. Yeah. I don't think it would have mattered in this game. I think Vanderbilt was going to win this game by a couple of scores. Vanderbilt now 3-0. They've gone on the road to Virginia Tech and South Carolina. Now, it's funny because, like, South Carolina was ranked highly because they beat Virginia Tech on a neutral field. Right. Vanderbilt was getting some plaudits because they beat Virginia Tech, not by as much as Old Dominion did, or right. maybe just slightly as much. So, but it looked clear Vanderbilt was the better team. And I do wonder with South Carolina, were they actually good, or did they get lucky towards the end of last season, and did they get overrated significantly as we went into this year? They wouldn't be the only team. There's some other teams in the country that I think fall into that category. But this looked like, if you'd taken the names off of it, you would have had no idea that Vanderbilt was that dominant in this game in Columbia. To me, this puts South Carolina like significantly in the lower middle of the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think Sellers makes a difference. He maybe gives them a couple more points, but if now Sellers is out, I mean, that's probably game over for South Carolina. He was the offense. He was the guy in that team. And to lose 30, this is what happened to them last year. They lost to LSU by 30, and that knocked them basically out because they couldn't overcome that big margin of victory loss. So now they lost to 24 points to Vanderbilt at home. And we have no idea where Vanderbilt's going to end up here. Last year they had that great win at Bama, but they still finished 6-6. So while they are 3-0, they have great wins. This is not putting Vanderbilt down at all. They're still probably being that 7-5. Maybe they get 7-5 this year. But this certainly, as you mentioned, certainly puts them behind Vanderbilt. But now is South Carolina now in that bottom 4, bottom 5 maybe, where Vanderbilt maybe pushes to that 10-9 spot where, okay, Vanderbilt could be a little frisky, maybe get to 4-4 in conference. And then you're having a different conversation for some of these SEC teams later on because they're going to have that big win against Vanderbilt.
Right. It's maybe they trade some of these things in terms of like who exactly is the good win or not. And it's one of those things in the SEC where like this happened last year. We didn't know until we got to the beginning part of November, like what were actually going to be the good wins and what weren't. So I don't know, something to keep in mind. Last game I want to hit, not in the SEC, Georgia Tech 24, Clemson 21. Georgia Tech wins this game despite not playing that well.
No.
Clemson looks dead in the water, 1-2, and their one win was a struggle at home against Troy. You've got Dabo Sweeney getting a lot of heat, and this to me, a lot of people have been like, well, Dabo isn't changing his ways, and it's like, this is what happens when you level the financial playing field.
Yeah.
And it's also what happens when, after a while, like your approach and the way that you are doing things offensively just comes back to bite you. And it feels like with Clemson, they were so consistently good for that 5 or 6 year period of time right before COVID. And you look at the results since then, and it's been fine. But this looks like the first year where like the bloom really comes off, and you can sustain that to some degree if you're not making $11 million a year, and if you're not supposed to be the load-bearing column for the entire ACC. But man, Matt, I mean, they could. It's not impossible they could fight their way back and get into the ACC title game, but at this stage, they don't look capable of getting to a bowl. I mean, it's going to be a real struggle for them at this point. It's kind of baffling how far off they've dropped.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just read you their point totals: 10, 27, 21. Okay, let's start. We'll start.
Wait, those are just the first halves, right?
I mean, the Clemson game, the first one was. So, I mean, there's a lot of Dabo's been resistant to change. He did not want to do. He's like, once players start getting paid, I'm leaving. Okay, well, you're still here. I'm not going to take transfers in. Well, you probably need some transfers because you guys, your offensive players are not as good as they used to be. You used to get all the top players. You had Trevor Lawrence, you had all these great guys. And Kate Klubnik's a really good quarterback. And so it just seems like they're running a very vanilla offense for maybe one of the more talented quarterbacks in the country. And I'm with you. I don't know where it changes. This game, I mean, don't get me wrong, Texas had a really good start to the season. They've beaten some good teams. They played Georgia really tough last year. They are a good team, but there's no reason you should lose that game if you're Clemson. And now Clemson, as you said, I have no idea where you go from here, right? They have Syracuse next week. I don't know what to expect. After that, they have the Fighting Bill Belichick's after that. But then towards the end of the season, they have SMU, Duke, Florida State, and Louisville in 4 straight weeks. And we both agree the ACC is not great, but Clemson's not great, right? At this point, Clemson has to run the table and expect them to win all the tiebreakers. That's their only way in, right? Their only way to the ACC championship to have an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough road, and it's the ACC, which we've talked about, is in trouble. In terms of getting a team or more than one team into the playoff this year. And you look down the list, I mean, they are you got Miami, and you've got Florida State, and I guess Georgia Tech's kind of lingering on the perimeter, but like essentially right now, there's only one team in the top 25 of FPI in the ACC, and that's Miami. And so all of these things ultimately kind of get your head wrapped around a conference that's supposed to be a power conference. Last year, they get 2 teams into the playoff. You've already had SMU lose a game. You've already had Clemson lose 2 games. You've already had Virginia and Pitt lose games. Duke's lost 2 games. And it's like, all these teams that were hypothetically contenders do not look like they're going to be contenders. If you're Louisville, you're like, hey, maybe this is our time. Maybe we've got an opportunity to jump in there. And I guess you got to throw Cal in there, maybe, given that they had a pretty big win over Minnesota.
Right.
But Clemson is really kind of when you look at their projected wins now, their projected wins are essentially 7-5. That would be earth-shattering if Clemson finished 7-5 after starting the year, at least in some polls, ranked number 1.
Right, and I was in the mind frame that this was a really good team. They played Texas really well last year in that playoff game. They obviously won on that late field goal to win the ACC championship. And I'm like, okay, they're going to turn the corner. Dabo's taking in transfers. He's not being as stubborn as he used to be. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't. It just looks like he's still living off 2018 and 26, that whole era, right? And so I don't know what the path is forward unless he's going to make some adjustments or this program makes adjustments. It's going to be a slog, and the ACC is probably down to one. Like we've talked about this, right? But they're probably down to one bid. And I mean, I'm not sure. Who do you think has a better shot, Notre Dame or Clemson? Just sitting here today,
Notre Dame. I mean,
think so.
Even without the chance of an auto bid, I think Notre Dame has a better shot simply because the fact that Notre Dame, I don't know if you saw this stat, Notre Dame became the first team to start a season 0-2 and be ranked at 0-2, the first team since 1988 that this has happened, which is ridiculous. I'm sorry, if they were named anything other than Notre Dame, they would not be ranked right now. But the fact that they are in that position and the fact they still get to go to Arkansas, the fact that they'll be favored, I think, against every single team remaining on their schedule. They're in better shape than Clemson, in as much as Clemson, having already lost one ACC game and still having to Louisville, having to travel to Boston College, which now suddenly doesn't look like that sure of a win, even though Boston College is not that good. They've still got Florida State on the schedule. It's just it's a tough row. And I guess the biggest difference for me is like Notre Dame's problems are a little more addressable because their offense looks like it can take some of the pressure off the defense, because the defense has been mediocre, but it hasn't been terrible. Clemson's offense is terrible. Clemson's offense right now in just pure this season only efficiency is 84th in the country through 3 games. That's just not going to get it done.
Well, and just watching them, they look like they have no idea what the next play is going to be. I'm like, it just looks like you said, it looks like there is no plan. And again, I'm not a coach, neither are you, but it just looks like there's no plan. They're running the play that maybe would work the best. Where, like you said, you watch Notre Dame, it's competent. Once they got going against Miami 2 weeks ago, in that second half, they started getting things going. And then this game against Texas A&M, the offense looks like it could be really good, but they're just in a spot where they have to win out. And like you said, their schedule lines up for opportunity. Where you look at Clemson, like I'm not saying that going to UNC is going to be tough, but Bill Belichick's won the last 2 weeks. It's been quieter. Give him some time to get it going. Maybe, and he's a better coach than Dabo, and just in general, probably.
Maybe.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see what happens. I don't know.
We'll see. No, it's again. There's some other landmines potentially in that mix. As we wrap up looking at that week, I mean, there were a couple other games that were notable. I think the ones I would mention just briefly: Texas struggled again offensively, only scores 27 points against UTEP, and as they noted on several other podcasts, like it's not just that they're struggling offensively. It's like Arch Manning looks like he just discovered how to throw a football. Like
he looks lost.
He looks just complete, like he's missing wide open guys on crossing routes and on outs to the sideline. It's nuts. Miami ends the South Florida dream. I was actually really impressed with Miami in that game. They just smooshed South Florida. It really, although I took more out of that, I took more of, wow, Boise State and Florida are real bad, as opposed to, wow, Miami's amazing. The only other game I would note from this week was, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I don't know what to make of Ole Miss. Like Ole Miss had to hang on. They really got lucky to win that game against Arkansas. And it makes me kind of curious because, Lane Kiffin nearly made the playoff last year at Ole Miss. Didn't. I don't think this team's going to have what it takes to make the playoff this year. His buyout is insanely low. Like his buyout is only $3 million this year if he leaves for somewhere else. And it's much larger if they fired him. They're never going to fire Lane Kiffin. No. But he could, like, if Florida does end up firing Billy Napier, that feels like an immediate plot point that we're going to see unfold. Because Lane Kiffin's been rumored for that particular job for a while, so I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Yeah, and he's 2-0 in the SEC, so he's got a good start. Like that's the one thing for him. The games he lost last year, he's won both of those this year. So at least he's, I guess, off to a path where he's now putting himself in a position to go 10-2. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's a lot better start than he had last year, or he finished his Pat Boyd last year. He's now has the opportunity to actually go finish it and actually do it. And I'm curious if he can actually pull it off.
Yeah. let's jump from talking about these games to what we wanted to talk about, and we actually just kind of talked about a little bit with his jobs open. So we had 2 jobs open in college football in the last 12 hours, basically.
almost like 20 minutes apart. It sounded like
Right. No, I think Well, UCLA announces that they're firing Deshaun Foster. That just felt from the very beginning like it wasn't going to work. Even the story about, Chip Kelly leaves relatively early or relatively late in the cycle in 2024, goes and becomes the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, stays there for 1 season, wins a national title, and then bounces. So in early February, they hired Deshaun Foster. Why? Well, he's inexpensive. $3 million a year, I think, was what he was getting paid. And in this era of college football, when that's your primary methodology for hiring a coach, this is almost always what is going to happen. This is just the wrong era to hire unproven coaches. And you add in all the other problems that UCLA has. The recruiting's not good. The NIL's not there. The stadium's not on campus. The fans are frustrated because they've had, what's felt like, 25 years of ineptitude at a time when USC has also been relatively inept over the last, 15 years or so. And they're just kind of like, if you looked at the Big Ten, you'd say, what school has the worst possible scenario unfolding in front of them right now? It's some combination of Maryland, Rutgers, Northwestern, and UCLA. And, at least with Rutgers, you feel like the support is there, but they made a bunch of bad hires before they went ahead and hired Schiano back. Northwestern, they've got more money than God. They're going to figure something out. They're building a new stadium. They'll probably be fine. Maryland and UCLA feel like they're in the same kind of hell. It's just that UCLA is in a worse position because they don't have any natural recruiting base, weirdly, despite being in Los Angeles. And now they're in a conference that nobody in the West Coast cares about. So they're completely a fish out of water at this stage. I don't know what they do moving forward. I really don't.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. And you mentioned Northwestern. At least at least the visiting teams can go to their stadium and sell it out. Like, who's going to UC? I know you went last year because you wanted to go to the Rose Bowl for the first time. But the next time you go, or if you want, you're not. I've already been. I'm not going to do this again, right? Or maybe you will, but it's going to be less.
I love Southern California, so I would go. But I guarantee a lot of those IU fans would be like, we've done this already. So you're 100% right. It's just and the low key problem with the Rose Bowl, of course, is that it's not easy to get to. It's not easy to get out of. It's a beautiful venue trapped in an infrastructure that belongs to 1967.
Yeah, it's a problem. Like, the stadium is obviously, it's great. The road, it's a terrible spot. But you saw the pictures of the crowd, and I know it's New Mexico, but you're not going to draw that outside of the USC game and maybe the Washington, Oregon when you have them at home. You gave this up. This was, again, you took the money that was in your right to do and go and kill the Pac-12 and be part of the Pac-12. But now you're in the Big Ten, and you're not a team that that's going to draw big crowds, right? And as you said, I think we both heard numbers that their NIL was somewhere in the low 5 millions, for the whole roster at some point. So I don't know where you go from a coach. Foster was a former player, and they thought, because he started off 1-7 or 2-7, finished the season strong. Maybe he'll get it going, and then it's just been this year. Losing to Mexico yesterday, or it was yesterday, it was just bad. And it's you looked at the crowd and they just looked despondent. And it's I can see a path forward to Rutgers getting to 7 or 8 wins, and that's probably where they're going to land. Maryland's a different story. They're just not a great athletic department. And Northwestern has, like you said, more money, but they also have every team right there. I have no idea what the plan for UCLA is. I don't know how you get competitive unless you really start investing. I don't see that happening. They haven't done it. And Chip Kelly had them 8-5, 9-4, 8-4 his last 3 years. That's unbelievably great for UCLA. Yeah. In the last 2-3 decades. I just don't know. And he left because he couldn't stand the administration. He wasn't getting support. Yeah. So if he's not getting support, who is?
It's a problem with certain schools, and I think UCLA is kind of the poster child for this to some degree. It's like, you can afford to lose. What you can't afford to do is not support your football program in this era. Mm-hmm. And UCLA, it's funny because the way that they handled the departure from the Pac-12, the way that they've handled their athletic department in general over the last, really ever since Wooden retired, has just been like, we don't have to put that much work into it. We don't have to put that much money into it. And that is just, this is what I was always worried like Indiana's athletic department would run into. But fortunately, about 15 years ago, Indiana actually was like, no, we really do need to put resources into the stadium, resources into the coaching staff in terms of salaries and recruiting. And we've got to try to find a way to compete. And it took them a while to find the right combination of AD and football coach, but they finally did. UCLA, I mean, really, like that athletic director, Martin Jarmon, has made so many mistakes. The fact that he's going to be leading this next hiring is like, what are you doing?
Right.
It doesn't really illustrate that you understand the problem that's at hand here. And, you're going to have, this is where I think we oftentimes see writers and fans conflating issues. Well, Nebraska is a great example of this. People look at Nebraska football and they're like, oh, they're lost. They don't know what they're doing. Nebraska football has got a ton of money. They've got a great stadium. They've got great resources. They have made bad hires, but they are well supported. And I actually think
they still show up. They still show up. Yeah.
And they will be okay. They may never be as good as they were, but they're never going to be in a position, I think, where they're the worst team in the conference and struggling to even like put 2 wins together. UCLA is absolutely in a spot with their football program where they could be like that. And you can't afford to do that right now, especially in a UC system that, I mean, the fact that the UC system essentially is making UCLA pay a tax to Cal for leaving the Pac-12 illustrates how little that system knows or cares about the impact of college sports. And you can debate the importance of college sports from a philosophical perspective, but then you miss out on the marketing and financial realities that you have to have in this era. Maybe UCLA is like, well, we recruit just off of our name. We don't need college sports. That's how they're acting right now. With football. I don't know if that's wise.
Right. Yeah. Long term. I don't think it's, you have, like you said, you have to invest in football, but you have to at least act like it. And they act like they don't want to put two cents into that program. And it's baffling because you made this move to come to the Big Ten with USC, and this would be the next steward of your athletic programs, and it just looks lost, and it looks like you said the AD just shouldn't be making any more hires at this point. They should they really need to figure out what they want to do and who they want to be. I was just looking at their schedule. They at least have a bye week. That Northwestern game, they're going to be playing in front of very few people, and it's only a 10,000 seat stadium, so it might be even less than that for that game.
Yeah, it's the other firing that happened. Brent Pry out at Virginia Tech after Virginia Tech suffers an ignominious defeat at Lane Stadium. They get obliterated by Old Dominion. It's one of those rare games where the score was not indicative of how much of a one-sided affair this was. It was 45-26, but at one point, I think it was 31-0 or something like that.
It was not close.
This was a one-sided affair, and I mean, IU fans were not surprised. We were like, hey, I think that Old Dominion team that we only beat by 13 was actually pretty good. And Virginia Tech found out. And it wasn't just that they lost that game. 12 penalties for Virginia Tech in that game. I mean, they ended up moving the ball towards the end, but it was just a bad exhibition of football by Virginia Tech. So they're hunting, and they're kind of in the opposite position of UCLA. This is a Virginia Tech program that has had some proud moments historically. They have obviously famously 25 years ago were in the national title game. Frank Beamer built something there that lasted for a long time. But again, series of poor hires, and now they find themselves really financially on the outside looking in. They've been the school. We've seen like presentations being made by their president about like, here's what we're going to have to do to compete. And it's essentially, oh, no big deal. Just raise $65 million.
Right.
It's if you're Virginia, here's the question I would have. If you're a head coach, or if you're looking to get a head coaching job, if you're a hot prospect and your top 2 places you could land would be the UCLA job over the Virginia Tech job, knowing everything you know about both of those jobs, which job would you take?
I'd probably wait for the next job as well. It's really unfortunate because growing up, Virginia Tech was, well, they weren't a powerhouse, but they were traditionally top 15. Beamer had it going. Obviously, those Michael Vick years were great. The Sandstorm, Laney Stadium. I mean, it was always a place. I'll never forget when they played Boise State that one year. I mean, it was always a the place to go. It was a top 15 program for a long time. And since the Fuentes year, the last couple of years, and certainly the Pry hire, it's fallen out of control. They have not been ranked at the end of the season since 2017. I mean, think about that for a program that was in the 2000s. They were ranked every year outside of 2003 for about 12 years. So
they haven't been ranked in season since 2021.
Yeah,
I mean, and you think about it, like Beamer from 2004 until 2011, they had double-digit winning seasons every single year during that stretch. And it's a shame what's happened to them. And unfortunately, they just feel like they are on the absolute wrong side of the financial equation. And I don't know exactly, I have no clue how they get out of that. And it'll be one of those situations where they will go out and probably make a very good hire. Like I could see them going and, getting the Old Dominion coach or getting somebody else who's like a good program builder.
Yeah.
But it's going to be one of those situations where that person will probably recruit better, probably coach better, but they're going to find themselves every year just a little bit further behind, not just the rest of the ACC programs that do have money, but significantly behind the SEC and Big Ten schools who are in their general area. And that, I don't know that there's a good way that they're going to be able to get out of that at this point.
No, and last year there was only one Power 5 job, right? It was the Purdue job. And this year we're expecting, there's already two already open. We're expecting a lot more from at least the SEC, probably some Big Ten jobs, maybe some Big 12 jobs. There's going to be a lot more jobs to pick from where Virginia Tech is not going to be on the higher side of that. They're going to be lower to middle or really low, right ahead of UCLA for one of those for those candidates. So they're in a tough spot. I mean, I hope they can figure it out. I think Virginia Tech is good for college football when we are really missing that part of it when they're not good.
Yeah. So here's the next question. What's the next job to open? The next Power 4 job to open, given everything that's going on right now.
Yeah. You would think Florida's up against it right now. I'm curious how long they let this go.
Are you surprised they didn't make a move, given that they have to play Miami next week?
Yes and no. I'm curious if they're waiting for a bye week. That's the only reason I can think of. And they didn't play terrible against LSU. They were in the game, sort of. They were never out of it. I never thought they were going to win, but they were never out of the game, I guess. That makes sense.
My question is, do they win again if they don't? If or if not, they make a change. I mean, here's the rest of the schedule for Florida. At Miami, Texas, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State at home, which no longer looks like a layup, Georgia, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, Tennessee at home, and Florida State at home. I mean, is 1-11 on the table for them. I mean, this has vibes of Florida State last year.
It does.
But they shouldn't be this bad. They just shouldn't be.
I think I text him, like, I feel like they'll pick somebody off. I don't know who, but because there's talent there. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, I mean, the defense played great last night, holding LSU to 20. And now you can say LSU wasn't great either. But certainly part of that's Florida's talent. They do have talent on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
It's Florida's another school. They're not on the Virginia Tech level because they're in the SEC and they have the resource to build it. But it's like the last 15 years is beating their heads against the wall, trying to figure out they keep making poor hires. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. It catches up with you. And we've seen it in so many different parts of college football over the course of time. It really happens in college basketball too.
Yeah.
It's as much as we try to minimize sometimes the impact of coaches, you almost can't overstate how important the right coach is and how easy it is to hire the wrong coaches. It's funny because you look at the landscape and try to figure out, well, who might be the next major coach fired. I think a lot of them, this was a point Colin Cowherd made, like the buyouts in this era, when you've got to account for revenue sharing, and that has thrown a lot of athletic departments into a situation where they've got to go find an extra $20 million just to balance their books.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of these buyouts, like for instance, the Pry firing is paid out in installments. And even like Luke Fickell, that's been a name that's been tossed around a bunch because Wisconsin does not look very good.
No.
That buyout, I think, would be, there's an upfront of like half the total, which would be like $10 million, and then it's in installments. That's still a ton of money. And where do you go get that from? You can't go to the donors and say, hey, we need $10 million, because they're like, we just gave you $10 million to recruit. So unless you've got some reservoir of cash available to you or donors you haven't tapped, like eventually you run out of those.
Right. And I mean, these next waves of coaches are not going to get, I would think they're not going to get these buyouts because they just can't afford in 3 years to be wrong. Right. And say, we owe you $60 million. They can't afford it anymore.
I mean, look, it was always financially just incredibly irresponsible.
Oh, 100%.
Public institutions to be giving these buyouts. I mean, just ludicrous, unless you were sure that this was the right guy and this was a sure thing. And at some point, you're right. Like the fulcrum is going to have to swing around because a lot of these programs are just not going to be able to afford to do this. And so that's going to be worth keeping an eye on. I think right now, it's unlikely anybody else is, at the top level is going to have the hammer fall on them like that, but we'll have to wait and see. It's an increasingly impatient world, and it has to be, as we mentioned at the top of the show, because you just don't have a lot of time to fix things.
Yep.
Let's jump forward, and it's time to get to the week 3 merit poll. All right. So we do not talk about these things ahead of time. We both submitted these things independently. We had some differences that were interesting. Let's pop this up and talk through it. All right. Our number ones are different. You had Ohio State number 1 and Georgia number 2. I had Georgia number 1 and Ohio State number 2. I'm curious. Let me just do your top 5. Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, FSU, LSU. I had Georgia, Ohio State, LSU, Oregon, Texas A&M. So your rationale for that top 5?
I mean, Ohio State, they didn't look great, but I didn't feel like they were enough to move them down. Obviously, Georgia played well. So I would have put Georgia 1 if they actually won the if they won the game like in regulation. It wasn't down, and they probably should have lost. So I kept Georgia just a little bit behind them. I kept Miami at 3. That Notre Dame went and then blowing you. I thought I think you mentioned blowing USF was really, really impressive this week. FSU, if I'm going to keep Alabama in my rankings, and we're anchoring that win, that win's still one of the biggest wins of the year. I kept FSU at 4. LSU I kept at 5 despite struggling against Florida, but they now have 2 pretty decent wins with Florida, and now they obviously, I guess they have Clemson, or they have Clemson as well, but they still have those 2 wins, and their defense looks really good. And when I see a defense look that good, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. So that's my top 5.
Yeah, with Georgia, I mean, my rationale was essentially, as I said earlier on, I think winning at Tennessee right now is probably the best overall win that anybody's got in college football. Yeah, it was an overtime. It was still a win at Tennessee, who I've also got in my top 10, and that really did carry the day for me. They moved them slightly ahead of Texas, in part because ahead of Ohio State, because the Texas win, I just think, looks slightly less impressive every week. Because Texas just can't score. They don't seem to be able to move the ball very effectively against bad teams, which makes the Ohio State defensive effort look slightly less impressive by comparison.
Yeah.
I actually thought Ohio State's, like, they struggled against Ohio. I was really impressive with how they finished the game against the Bobcats, and that's not a terrible Bobcats team. I mean, they're 72nd in FPI, they're 87th in S&P. They're not horrific. LSU, I almost dropped a little bit lower, but I didn't want to punish them too much. The interesting thing about LSU is, this is where the merit poll, I do put the team's power rankings into the equation a little bit, just to try to get a sense of where they're at. LSU is 17th in S&P Plus and 19th in FPI, despite the wins that they've got, the win at Clemson, the win at home versus Louisiana Tech, and then this win against Florida. I just don't know if any of those 3 wins is as impressive as we thought that they were. And yet they've got 3 of them, 2 of them against, good competition, power 2 competition, or power 4 competition. Oregon's a tough one. Oregon's actually number 1 if you average SP Plus and FPI. They've got 2 power conference wins. I cannot for the life of me understand why they dropped 2 spots in the AP poll despite winning a conference road game by 20 points. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I don't see that either. Yeah.
But but they were really impressive in that Oklahoma State game. They dominated the Northwestern game. And then A&M, they squeaked out the win at Notre Dame, but they've got that win. And even though they also are not terribly high in the power polls, that UTSA win actually looks better now because UTSA is kind of like a almost mid-tier team in college football at this point. Going down the rest of it, Miami, again, it's like, does the Notre Dame win look a little bit less impressive now? Perhaps. The South Florida win, by beating them that much, maybe that looks a bit less impressive. And I'm a little concerned by Miami's overall power ranking. It should be much higher given the wins that they've got, but they just haven't looked as statistically impressive as I would like to see, all things considered. Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, to me, are kind of clustered in a very similar manner in that both of those teams are probably, just from a power perspective, like 25 to 35 overall. But I like the fact that Vanderbilt's gotten it done on the road twice, and I like the fact that Georgia Tech's gotten it done on the road and also beat Clemson at home. And then the rest of it, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I still don't know what to do with Iowa State. They're 4-0, but they're not very good in the power ratings because they've really just squeaked out these wins. This week was no exception. And then you just kind of go down the rest of the list. Like I think our biggest deltas on this for the rest of the way was you had Illinois 12. I had Illinois dropped a little bit to 15 because they really were anemic against Western Michigan for the first half of that game. And
Utah's a little different.
You had Utah a bit higher. My big thing with Utah, and again, I dropped them because of the fact that UCLA had to fire their coach. Their one signature win suddenly looks kind of less impressive, and I'm not going to give them a lot of credit for winning at Wyoming. I mean, they get a little bit, but not that much.
Yeah. The one team that I really want to point out, I had a hard time. I had Tennessee. I kept going back and forth. Do I put them higher? Do I put them lower? But that's, to me, the highest one-loss team that I had on my list. I think you had them a couple spots down. They're a team that certainly could rise a little higher. I actually had Alabama re-enter. I know the Wisconsin wins, maybe not the biggest of wins, but certainly winning a Big Ten game at home kind of rights the ship a little bit. I think that's really, really big for them, getting back in the mix. So I put them back in because my thought was too, well, if I'm putting Florida State this high, Alabama has to be somewhere in the mix as well. So that certainly helped them a little bit. And then I think I had Vanderbilt and I had Indiana. I dropped Texas to 19. I got to see something from Texas at some point. I think you had Texas all the way out.
Yeah. Well, if you'll notice, you had Texas 19th. I not only did I have Texas out, you notice who else I didn't have in there at all.
You didn't have Clemson, right? Or
Penn
State. You didn't have Penn State either, yeah.
And again, it's like Penn State won, good for them, but I just have a hard time giving them credit for not even covering against Villanova. And they looked bad in that game, and they didn't look great in the first two.
Yeah.
So at Alabama, I had 21st. Penn State, I had 22nd. So they were both kind of right on the outside looking in. But again, it's the merit poll, and the way I'm trying to approach it is I'll take your power rating into account if you've actually also beaten somebody. And even Alabama, it's hard for me to take the Wisconsin win that seriously. If they'd won by more, perhaps, but they didn't completely squish them. They didn't score as many points as I would have expected. The fact they came back to earth a little bit, I don't know. Again, we're going to find out a lot about them very quickly, so I'm not too worried about this week with them, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
And maybe you're feeling the same way. It's just so hard to do when you have like Penn State playing these three teams, then you have Ohio State playing this, or it's challenging. This is going to work. It will work itself out in the coming weeks, because we'll have better competition, because there's very few out of conference games in the next 6 weeks here. So certainly we'll get to see how this plays out, especially for those teams that really haven't played anybody yet, and we'll see some of those here certainly in the Big Ten in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Let's wrap things up by taking a look at the upcoming schedule for this week. We've got some ranked games with teams playing each other. I don't know if ESPN noticed. Clearly they didn't. But you could make an argument like the biggest game this upcoming week in terms of ranked team versus ranked team is happening right here in Bloomington, as Indiana, 19th in the AP poll, hosts number 9 Illinois. This is going to be a fascinating game. Illinois might be a bit overranked if you look at their power rating and what they've done so far. The Duke win doesn't look as impressive. Indiana's win against Old Dominion suddenly looked significantly more impressive, but they've also played 2 cupcakes the other 2 games. I'm very fascinated to see what happens in this one, as Indiana looks like they're going to be down one of their 3 running backs. Lee Beebe suffered some kind of an injury. We don't have any word on it yet. Probably get that tomorrow, but they have looked progressively better offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, to me, the matchup here, how does Indiana's defense handle Illinois' offense? Is Illinois' offense really that good? And I don't think anybody really knows. Like, these 2 teams are still a little bit of a mystery in terms of how good they actually are.
Yeah, this is one of those games that certainly feels like, why isn't game day coming here? But that's okay. That's fine.
You're in the Big Ten. That's why.
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't. The game they picked is really whatever. Doesn't matter.
Miami, Florida. Wow.
Yeah. I hate to use hyperbole, but certainly with how Indiana was treated in the offseason, this is a really big game for Indiana. To win it, to play a top 10 team in Memorial Stadium, to really maybe announce that they're here, that, hey, last year wasn't a fluke. It's a big game, just from a perception standpoint for them. Now, with that said, Illinois in the same boat. They haven't played anybody yet. They want to say, hey, we are also here. Yep. We feel like we're in the mix of the playoff. We feel we got the shaft last year. It's a big game for them to see if they can go on the road in a tough environment. Now that Indiana, I mean, you saw there on Friday night, student section was packed, and that's a difference right now that didn't exist in prior seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Illinois last year; they did beat South Carolina in the bowl game.
Yeah.
But they played 2 games on the road against ranked opponents last year, and they lost at Penn State 21-7, and they lost at Oregon 38-9. And I mean, they won a lot of good games last year, but as you said, like, this is a game where Illinois can really announce themselves on the national stage as like, hey, we just beat a top 20 opponent on the road. And conversely, if Indiana wins this game, they're right back in the playoff conversation again. It's going to be a really fascinating thing. We talked about this on Crimson Cast. This might be a slightly bigger game for Illinois because they don't have a lot of other options on the schedule to pick up a huge win. They get Ohio State at home. That's their other big one. Whereas Indiana could ostensibly lose this game, and they still got a game at Iowa, they got a game at Oregon, they got a game at Penn State. They've got some time to make that up if they needed to. So really fascinating game. A couple other ranked opponent contests. Texas Tech at Utah. That's the big noon kick. That's a really interesting game because, again, like, I don't think we have any idea how good either of these teams are. Texas Tech has won big against really terrible teams so far this year, and Utah has done the same thing. Yep. So, Big 12, really fascinating contest. I have no clue what to expect out of this one at all.
No, and I've watched a little bit of Texas Tech. They move the ball really well. I didn't know a lot about them going in, but I'm really excited that they're playing. That the Big Noon's going for a 10 a.m. kick out in Salt Lake City for this game. I don't get me wrong, I wanted the game to be here, but if anybody's going to get a Big Noon, I'm glad it's Utah at 10 a.m. Yeah. I'm excited for this one. I think it'll be great. Give the Big 12 some love. These 2 teams are probably the top 5 teams in the conference, so we'll get a good barometer of where these teams stand to this game.
At 3:30, you've got Auburn ranked 22nd at Oklahoma ranked 11th. This is a really fascinating one. I mean, both of these teams are, as we talked about earlier with our SEC convo, they're kind of on the outside looking in terms of the national conversation. A win by either of them puts them in really good position. I mean, Auburn, it would give them their second big road win. They also beat Baylor, and that win looks better and better.
Yep.
And, the thing with Auburn is it's a tough road for them. At Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, Georgia, Mizzou, at Arkansas, at Vanderbilt, Alabama, all those games still on the schedule. Yeah. They really can't afford to lose this game and stay, I think, at pace with everybody else in that conference. Yeah. And while it's not that much easier for Oklahoma because they got to go to Tennessee, South Carolina, and Alabama and still play Missouri and LSU at home, this kind of feels like whoever loses this game is really behind the 8 ball if they want to keep pace for the playoff.
Yeah, the winner of this game has the inside track because that will give them, especially Auburn, 2 big road wins. I know you said Baylor's certainly looking a lot better, but having out of conference road win and a home and an early conference game against Oklahoma, and even Oklahoma having Auburn and Michigan, both those wins, being 4-0 in the month of September. And Batir looked really good a couple weeks ago, and I was a little skeptical until they followed up. I know Temple's not great, but certainly saying, okay, we're gonna beat Michigan, then we're also gonna beat Temple really badly. That was impressive because that's always a tough game to come back for the next game. So this is the biggest game for Oklahoma since Lincoln Riley left. And maybe that's hyperbole, but they really need to get this one for the rest of the year and have an opportunity to playoff. Conversely, Auburn's in the same boat, but certainly it feels like Oklahoma is just a tiny bit better than Auburn. And I think the spread highlights that of being a 6.5-point favorite for Oklahoma on today.
CBS 3:30, Michigan ranked number 21 at Nebraska. Another game where Sharon Moore will not be on the sideline.
Not allowed there.
I got to ask, was it worth the Oklahoma games? You know, I mean, I feel like the Nebraska game might have been more important to have your head coach on the sideline. I don't know.
I don't know.
But Michigan was very impressive in their blowout win this past weekend. Nebraska 3-0. Feels like Nebraska was at this exact same juncture last year, had a similar type of team in Illinois come in, and then they lost the game. This has got, you talk about games that kind of get you to that next level. It feels like this is the game that Nebraska has to win.
Yep.
It's at home. It's on national television. It's a 2:30 local kick. And I got to tell you, Matt, if they can win this game, as I look at their schedule, there's not a lot of other potential losses on the schedule prior to that penultimate game they've got in the regular season at Penn State. Like, they've got a really fascinating road if they can win this game. I mean, that's the big question mark, obviously. But Michigan, obviously, they've already got the one loss. They have a weird team. I still don't know what to make of their team exactly at this point. We keep getting told Bryce Underwood's awesome. I need to see it against a good team for 4 quarters. I have no idea what to expect out of this game in terms of how it finishes, other than Michigan's a 1.5-point favorite right now going in to Lincoln.
Yeah, and you made a great point about Bryce Underwood. He's still a freshman, so we have to keep that in mind too. Like, he got thrown in the den pretty early here, and I'm not saying that he's not struggling. He certainly is, but it will be interesting to see how he progresses. This is his second really big, tough road environment. I'm curious if he handles this better than he did the first one. Now, let's touch on Nebraska. They brought in Matt Rule to win this game. They have not. They didn't do it last year. They started 5-1, finished 7-5, 7-6,
7-5, I think. Yeah,
7-5. They lost a game in Indiana, and then after that, the wheels just fell off. This is a game, and as you mentioned, the schedule lightens up after this one. If they can get this one, whether it's a 10-point win, 3, it doesn't really matter. It puts Nebraska maybe back in that conversation that they have been asking for over a decade. And I think both you and we both think Matt Rule's a really good coach. Mm-hmm. Is this the turning point for Nebraska and for him to actually get this program to that next level, not just the same level they've been at of right in the middle, not even right in the middle, below average to the middle, but getting past that middle, like getting to 9-3. I think it's really important for them, even the fan base. And as we said earlier, how great is the fan base? It's still $135 getting this game on Saturday. So those people will show up, and I'm curious how this goes. And as you said, Michigan's a 1.5-point favorite going in there. So if there's anything that bulletin board material, if you will, that should be, hey, they're coming in here. We are better than Michigan. Let's show that we are a top Big Ten team.
Last one I'll mention, South Carolina at Missouri. Missouri's like an 11.5-point favorite in this game, and Missouri's look really good. And it's not just that they look good; it's that Bo Pribula looks awesome. Or is it Pribula? I'm sure how his last name is pronounced. I should look that up. My apologies. But they've looked good so far. They're ranked. South Carolina was ranked. They fell out of the poll, losing that game. If South Carolina is indeed a contender, they really can't afford to lose any more games. Whereas Mizzou, at this point, they are really fascinating, because if they win this game, they're going to beat UMass the following week. And then they get this fascinating stretch where they get Alabama, at Auburn, at Vanderbilt, and Texas A&M at home. Winning this game would allow them to lose one of those games, maybe even 2, and still stay in the mix. You lose this game, you're now in that, like, firmly in that second echelon with probably no good way of getting out.
Yeah, it is. You're right. And sometimes like all sport, it's catching the team at the right time. So not saying South Carolina was going to win this game, but certainly them not having their quarterback potentially for this next game, that is a win for Missouri when you're trying to figure out how to get to 9 or 10 wins, especially with after that UMass game. It gets difficult, but they have that bye right for the Vanderbilt game. So I'm curious how this can work for Missouri as they now hopefully plot for them to plot towards 5-0 and really get moving.
Yeah. So. Any other games of note for you next week, or we wrapped up on this one?
I think that's it. It's a lighter slate. The following week is the slate you should be staying at home and doing nothing. That slate is remarkable.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot going on there, but we'll save that for the podcast next weekend, as we'll have plenty to talk about with all of that. But a lot of good games coming up this upcoming week. We look forward to chatting with you about all of them after the fact. Matt, as always, a pleasure. And we're back fully in football season. We're essentially fully in conference play. There's a couple of straggler non-con games left, but we're pretty locked in at this point. We're midway through September. We are heading into football weather season. We'll go ahead and wrap up. Our thanks to our sponsors, Home Field Apparel, and our hosts, the Back Home Network. For Matt Blaszka, I'm Galen Clavio. This is Football Weather. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. So long, everybody.